we're going to talk about how you can use if statements to create different states. And by state, I mean like a scene. So imagine you put down all the code, you have a beach scene, and then you can press with your mouse or with a key press, and then you get a night scene. Or it could be what you have for your homework assignment, one type of face, and then you click and you get a different face. So they're kind of like these different states. So for example, I showed this in the last video, but in case you didn't watch that video, I have one facial expression here. This is like one scene or one state, one option, you could think of it. I click and I get this option. And I get this guy who's mad. And then I get this one who's scared. Oh no. And then I get this guy who's just kind of busy eating and had a little bit too much to eat. So these are just all in different if statements. All right, so let's talk about how to build this. The first thing that we're going to do is I'm simply going to make a variable. I'm declaring it, initializing it as an int type, and declaring its name as option, and I'm going to have it equal 1. So I'm going to get a sketch going on here. So int option, and it's going to equal 1. That's just what I decided to call it. You could call it, Bob's hot dog stand, Ted's fish fry, state, scene, whatever. I'm calling it option. And so option starts out as equaling 1. And again, it doesn't have to equal 1. That's just kind of what's going to make sense because we're going to have each scene equal a higher number. Okay, so step 2 is I'm going to make my if statement. Now I'm going to write if, and in here in the parentheses, my Boolean statement, option equals 1. And then I have my open curly brackets, and this is where I'm going to put my code. This would be my code for my face. I want to point out, why do I have 2 equal signs here? But up here, it's 1 equal sign. This is because I'm declaring option to equal 1. This is its value. But here, this is a question. So if option equals 1, so if that's the value that it equals, it's a question. So that's why I have 2 equal signs and not 1 equal sign. I'm not saying it equals it, I'm asking if it equals it. Anyway, so that's where we are with this. So I'm going to put in my if option 2 equals 1, open curly bracket, closing curly bracket, and this is where I'm going to put my code. And for right now, I'll just put in a rectangle. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to have some kind of shape and put that in here. Okay, so if I'm in option 1, I get a rectangle. Well, I only have one option, so that's all I'm going to have. Okay, so now let's add another option. So if, and this is going to be option 2, give me another shape. All right, so this is my closing bracket right here for this if statement. So I'm going outside of that, and I'm going to create an if, oops, option equals 2, closing bracket. Give me something else. Give me an ellipse that is, I don't know, just pick up some numbers. Oops, not that number. Give me an ellipse. Okay, so I'm saying if I'm in option 1, which I am when I start, right, give me this rectangle. If I'm in option 2, I'm in the ellipse. But how do I get it to go to option 2? That we haven't talked about yet. So that's step 4. Oh, actually, I guess I put it as step 5. So step 4 was putting in the second option. And step 5 here is we're going to use that void mouse press I talked about in the last video. So what am I saying here? Void mouse press, option plus plus. That is the same as writing out what we've done before. Option equals option plus 1. It's just a keyboard shortcut, and it's really useful. So instead of having to write all this out, I write option plus plus. If option, so I'm saying add onto option. So in other words, option starts out as 1, but then I press the mouse and it adds 1 to 1, so now option equals 2. Okay, so this is how I'm getting it to go from option 1 to option 2. I'm just adding to it. And then how do I get it to go from 2 to 1? I say, well, if option becomes greater than 2, switch it back down to 1. So let's see what this is going to work, how this is going to work. Back over to this one, and this is a separate code block. So I am pasting it below the closing bracket for my draw. And let's just close up a couple of these guys. Okay, so I press play and I see my rectangle square, and I press and I get my ellipse. Now they're not disappearing because I don't have a background in the draw. So let's get that in there. And that will erase the old one. So I'll just put in a background of, I should probably spell it correctly though. Okay, so now I have a background. So option 1 starts out with, and then I click and I now get option 2. And I click again and it brings me back to option 1. Back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so let's look at this again. Why does it jump from option 1 to option 2? Because I have in my code that says if the mouse is pressed, add 1 onto option. So it starts from 1 and it goes to 2. That's how I jump from one to the next. Why does it jump back from 2 to 1? Because I have an if statement. This is just like the if statement that we use for reversal. It says if you're larger than 2, switch back to 1. Okay, so let's add a third one. So back to our code. I'm going to say, again, so these are all their own. This is option 1 up here, option 2, and now I'm going to add option 3. So if option equals 3, open curly brackets, closing curly brackets. Oh, I think I have a triangle here. I'm just going to take that code so I don't have to type that out. Give me a triangle. Okay, so this would still only take me from option 1 to option 2 because I have this here saying if you get to be higher than 2, go back to 1. So I need to change this because now I have 3 options to 3. And so I see my square, my circle, my triangle, and it goes back over and over again like a mad circle. Okay, so for your homework assignment, I'm not done here, but just to point out, you have to have 4 options, which means this option statement here should have a 4. Okay, at this point, I'd like you to stop and practice. Try to digest everything I just talked about, and then without looking at your code, try to do another one with 3 different options, just like we did with some different shapes, and having them cycle through on the mouse click, okay? Take a break, practice, and then watch the next video.